Ever wonder what a guy in chains writing from a Roman prison 2,000 years ago could possibly teach us about our lives? About office politics, or that constant digital anxiety, or even just how to be grateful? Well, today we're going to unpack a letter from the Apostle Paul that is, you won't believe it, a surprisingly practical playbook for some of our most modern problems.
So, yeah, that's really the core question we're digging into here. How can this ancient letter actually help us? We're going to see how Paul's advice on settling a pretty nasty dispute, his step-by-step guide for beating anxiety, and even this really complex thank you note he writes, how they all come together to give us a powerful framework for our own lives. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, first things first. To really get the advice, you've got to understand the situation he was in. I mean, this isn't some abstract philosophical essay. This is a playbook written from the inside of a prison cell. So picture this. It's about 62 AD. Paul is not sitting in some cozy study with a cup of tea. No, he is in a Roman prison, in chains. Why? For spreading his beliefs. I mean, the stakes for him and for everyone following him could not possibly be higher. But here's the wild part, the incredible irony of it all. The whole plan to shut him up, it completely backfired. He actually writes that being in prison is advancing his message. It's even getting to the emperor's own guards. So from this totally unexpected position of influence, he gives his followers one single powerful command: stand firm. Stand firm against what, though, you might be asking? Well, this is where it gets interesting. Paul immediately pivots. He goes from the threats on the outside to a huge threat on the inside, a very specific, very personal conflict that was literally threatening to tear their whole community apart. And he doesn't beat around the bush. He names names. A really serious disagreement had erupted between two women, Euodia and Syntyche. And listen, this was not some minor tiff. This was a big deal, serious enough that Paul felt he had to address it from prison. So the big question is, who were these women? All right, this is where the historical detective work kicks in. The truth is, we don't know for sure, but scholars have some really compelling theories. The one that makes the most sense is that they were prominent leaders, maybe even leaders of house churches. And that's what made their fight so dangerous for the whole community. Some people even speculate that one of them could have been Lydia, who is a key foundational member of that church in Philippi. But at the end of the day, as scholar Dr. Darko so perfectly puts it, the simple answer is, we just don't know. And maybe that's the whole point. See, Paul isn't interested in the gossip. He's not trying to take sides. His focus is 100% on the solution. And that solution? Well, it involves another mystery. Paul calls on someone he calls a true yoke fellow, basically a trusted partner, to step in and help these two women work it out. But who on earth was this mediator? Okay, the listed suspects here is just fascinating. It could have been one of his known buddies, like Timothy or Silas. Get this, one early church father, a guy named Clement of Alexandria, even guessed it was Paul's wife. Another theory is that it was a husband or a brother of one of the women. Or, hey, maybe the Greek word souzugos wasn't a title at all. Maybe it was just the person's actual name. We just don't know. But again, like with the women, their actual identity is less important than the big idea here. Paul's strategy is brilliant. It shows that fixing a conflict needs two key things. First, the people in the fight have to want to fix it. And second, you need a trusted, respected mediator to help guide them. I mean, that's just a timeless piece of wisdom for how any healthy community works, right? Now, this kind of conflict, it doesn't just cause division. It creates this cloud of anxiety that hangs over the whole community. And Paul gets this, so he does something brilliant. He zooms out from this one specific problem to offer a universal antidote for worry. And what he gives them is this super practical three-step process. Step 1, don't just sit there and worry, pray, and be specific about it. Step 2, do it with thanksgiving. That means having an attitude of gratitude, not like you're entitled to something. And step 3, that's the result, which Paul basically gives as a promise. The peace of God will come. And this peace he's talking about, he says it's a peace that surpasses all understanding. It's that profound. But here's the key thing. It is not just some passive, floaty feeling. Pay close attention to that last word he uses. It will guard your hearts and your minds. Why guard? Well, this is so cool. The original Greek word is phroureo, and that is a military term. It means to post a soldier as a sentinel to garrison a city to protect it from invasion. So what Paul is saying is that this peace will act like a soldier, actively standing guard over your emotions, your heart, and your logic, your mind, protecting them from being totally overrun by anxiety. So, okay, once that guard is on duty, what are you supposed to let inside the fortress of your mind? Paul gives him a very specific checklist. He says, fill your thoughts with whatever is true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, anything excellent or worthy of praise. But then he adds a crucial final step. It's not enough to just think about these things. You have to put them into practice.
All right, the letter wraps up with what looks like a simple thank you note, but it's actually a bit of a puzzle. Paul finally gets around to thanking the Philippians for a financial gift they sent him, but the way he does it, his tone is really complex, almost awkward.
In fact, some people have even called it a thankless thank you because the tone is just so hard to pin down. And scholars are all over the place on this. Is he just being genuinely grateful? Or is he maybe a little annoyed because he really valued his independence and didn't like taking handouts? Or is he doing this delicate dance, trying to show he's thankful while also making it super clear that his mission is not about money? Honestly, it feels like a little bit of all of the above. And you can see this tension perfectly in how he structures it. Right smack in the middle of thanking them for their cash, he drops this incredibly powerful statement about his own self-sufficiency, which you'll probably recognize has become one of the most famous verses in the entire Bible. But then, in the very next breath, he follows it up with this really sincere expression of gratitude. It's just a masterful balancing act. He's affirming his own strength that comes from God, but also showing his deep, genuine appreciation for their partnership with him. So when you take a step back and look at the whole letter, you start to see these big themes woven all the way through, right? The incredible value of friendship and partnership, the idea that you can find joy even when you're suffering, the call to be humble and unified, and the huge importance of having good role models to look up to. Which really just leaves us with one final thought. For us, right here, right now, in a world that feels so full of division and anxiety, what would it actually look like to use Paul's prison playbook? What would it mean to stand firm, with our minds actively guarded by peace and our hearts genuinely filled with gratitude? It's a question from 2,000 years ago that honestly feels more relevant than ever.